Okay, looks like we made it towards the end. Here we go. Postlude, page 109 if you're following in the book. Starts with a quote from Joan Baez. You don't get to choose how you're going to die or when. You can only decide how you're going to live now. Dirty work. On November 8th, 2016, Donald J. Trump was elected President of the United States. The U.S. is one of the largest forces of ecological destruction on the planet, as well as a hope for global change. This is the nation that invented the wilderness preserve. But the election doesn't bode well if the U.S. must lead people to live more sustainably. An open climate change denier, Trump suggested snowstorms prove global warming is a hoax. A month later, President-elect Trump chose climate change denier Scott Pruitt to head the Environmental Protection Agency. And ExxonMobil CEO Rex Tillerson, perhaps not a denier, but still a challenging pick for people concerned about the ecological crises, to be Secretary of State. Deniers misrepresent climate science as in doubt and grab headlines. The disproportionate coverage of outlier, contrarian, skeptical, and denialist claims has challenged efforts that seek to expand rather than constrict the spectrum of possibility for varied forms of climate action. In recent years, ecological sustainability has become a so-called liberal concern, not a concern for all humanity. More than a failure of media coverage, Trump's election may point to an underlying failure of education institutions to cultivate ecologically literate citizens, and deeper, a problem of the human spirit, a religious and spiritual problem, as suggested in Chapter 5, Spiritual Praxis. There was little discussion of climate change or any other ecological crisis during the 2016 U.S. presidential campaign. Climate change wasn't a significant portion of any of the debates, wasn't a driving headline for paper, online, or television media, and didn't seem a part of day-to-day conversations about the election in my local community. This was painful. Those who voted for Trump are often described as doing so for economic reasons, poor white rural voters who were left behind by the global neoliberal economy. This seems like a failure of consciousness of intersectionality, the relationships among multiple dimensions and modalities of social relations and subjective formations. Both major parties failed to realize intersectionality, discussing each issue separately and severed from others. Intersectionality proposes gender, racial, economic, ecological issues can be analyzed as related, that is, intersecting. If intersectionality is accurate, it is impossible to improve social concerns without addressing the ecological crises. Intersectionality exists because there is an underlying reality, that of unjust domination. See Chapter 4, Deep Ecology. If intersectionality is false, and economic gain is opposed to ecological sustainability, which is intimated in much popular rhetoric, then the challenge of human survival goes to the root of our neoliberal economy. This gives grave meaning to dirty work. Jobs are inherently dirty, polluting the environment. However, given the choice of sustaining an unjust version of the free market economy or sustaining human existence, the choice is obvious. Human life is a higher requirement than our current economic system, whatever its positive elements. If humans cannot live, no economy exists. In this book, I have argued for an intersectional concept. Environmental issues are economic, racial, cultural, and gender issues. See Chapter 4, Deep Ecology. And deeper, the ecological crises are crises of spirituality, a failure of religion. See Chapter 5, Spiritual Praxis. The intersections between the ecological crises, racial injustice, patriarchy, and economic stratification seem invisible to the educated public. For instance, in the Syrian refugee crisis, which began as unprecedented drought, we see an ecological crisis, climate change, intersecting with racial injustice, patriarchy, and economic stratification. Could an eco-literate citizenry reject the overwhelming evidence for human-caused global climate change, or care so little about the ecological crises to ignore these crises cost to people, a cost felt most strongly by poor people and women, non-human animals, and plants? This book is based on the premise that music educators have opportunities to educate students for ecological consciousness by orienting people to their local sonic environments and cultures and cultivating global ecological literacy. Music provides unique ways to think about act to address ecological crises and to teach and learn sustainable living. There are opportunities because of connections between soundscape and musicking and the people musicking for ecological activism when music educators don't overlook these musics. A conservative. Driving to work, I pray the rosary. I learned the first 3 Hail Marys recall the 3 foremost virtues of Christian life: faith, hope, and love. Caritas is also translated as charity. These virtues help me face the abyss of the ecological crises with courage. In My Child, an old priest once said, "Faith isn't belief. If you believe, you wouldn't need faith." The nuances distinguishing between the two concepts, faith and belief, often elude me, but I do often lose belief in God, in myself, in my family, friends, society, and in music education. Faith is embedded in the paradox of the cross, the greatest paradox of all, that to live we have to die. Faith reminds me in times of disbelief that I'm not God or even a God, and do not and cannot know many things. Seeing no reason to believe it's true, I have faith God will help humanity become better stewards of our common home. On the cross, we give up the fantasy that we are in control, and the death of this fantasy is central to acceptance. Perhaps faith begins with acceptance, especially in moments of incredulity, keeping us from submerging into psychological darkness. But it is also humility. Faith keeps my Promethean self, who would burn the whole world to steal from the gods, in check. Faith helps me to say yes sometimes, and at others to say no. This is a sophisticated conscientization. I have hope, not only that Jesus will return, but also that we can live better on this planet in the meantime. I hope we start to value people, not only rich white men. I hope we recognize how our society is unfair and make it better. I hope we recognize our interdependence with non-human life. Hope is not immobile wanting. Fox discusses hope as a verb, recommending it's time to go to work to defend Mother Earth. I hope as an action in society. And finally, love. More than other virtues is a practice. The practice of love lies in the daily small acts, making the world a better place. Parker Palmer writes, quote, "A community consists not of specialized professionals, but of generalized amateurs. It is worth recalling that the root meaning of amateur is lover, one who acts out of love for what one is doing. Love is ultimately the source of all abundance in life, and when love flows from us, our abundance becomes clear." End quote. I undeniably identify as liberal, but expressing my philosophy within the context of prayer and Christian virtue makes me seem conservative. Palmer writes, "We project our inner darkness on others, making enemies of them, and making the world a more dangerous place." I wonder how much accepting the preset labels, liberal and conservatives, makes enemies of others. Some of the values I hold dear can be understood as conservative, especially conserving soil, the places and traditions as lived for generations. A spiritual practice is facing, not hiding from paradox. I am not conservative in the same way as Roger Scruton, who theorizes in environmental conservatism, though his version of conservatism could provide an expression of eco-literate music pedagogy. I recommend something different than more research technology and decentralized initiative to solve the ecological crises. I recommend fundamental relocalization, reorientation to place, people, and local histories, unlike to his environmental conservatism. And I recommend a spiritual renewal, a philosophy of music education on soil. Identifying myself as conservative can be understood as a practice of love. It will help to clarify the ways I am connected to those I have least identified with. With an appreciation for diversity, it may be that good change lies in our commonalities. To identify myself as conservative requires reflection on what the word conservative inspires me to think about. Conservative begins with my role as an autoethnographer. As an autoethnographer, a scholar who analyzes and writes honestly about myself within the context of culture and history, my first aim is to conserve myself. That is, I want to conserve my humanity. That requires conserving many other things, including my flawed perspective, the humanity of others, the health of traditional cultures, and the rights of God's creation. Conserving the humanity of others, health of traditional cultures, and rights of God's creation makes me conservative in a distinctive way, placing me in opposition to one of modern society's least conserving institutions, global neoliberalism. Though the U.S., at least conservatives, seem to be industry's greatest advocates, the term neoliberalism relates to liberalism for a reason. Neoliberalism extends liberal human rights to corporate persons. For instance, neoliberal ideals defend corporate persons' rights to move across national borders in a way many liberals wish human persons could. Neoliberalism doesn't discriminate openly. If a person of color or woman, a transgender person, or a Muslim becomes a CEO, neoliberalism values them, paying them more and more, while paying other workers less and less. Neoliberalism uses money to assign value. Everybody in a neoliberal society knows how valuable she or he is, having an objective, non-discriminatory measure of self-value. Neoliberalism allows the wealthy consumers in America and Europe to buy products made in the two-thirds world and to claim lowered greenhouse gases while declaiming the increased emissions of the two-thirds world. The lifestyle of neoliberal consumers is at the expense of social majorities. Neoliberalism is anti-conservative in destroying the religious traditions and places of many cultures and rural people, declaring their children's right to be educated, to be developed, to be urbanized, to be better yet suburbanized, since urban areas aren't nearly as polluting as rich suburbs. Neoliberalism teaches the next generation to leave home, and the young to think themselves more intelligent, more technologically savvy, in short, better than their bumpkin parents. This is consistent with Bauer's comment, only in America is free market liberalism labeled as an expression of conservatism. Neoliberalism inequities aren't in its conservatism. Neoliberalism isn't about conserving anything really, and it's a very new economic system compared to other historic market systems. Neoliberalism's inequities are in its extension of liberalism. It's no surprise that our liberal music education institutions value suburban music education programs and fill university positions with those who are successful, for instance, winning performance competitions, something music teachers in poor rural and urban places can hardly hope to accomplish with any regularity. In preset, antiquated, and rigid job categories, many urban and rural music educators teach bands, choirs, orchestras, general music classes, and others. They don't focus on one. This is understood as a lack of expertise. In many rural communities, band prevails, but without the prestige, such as competition trophies, suburban band directors receive. The neoliberal suburbanites, selling our children the gods of capital, the music industry, the technology industry, the record industry, define their work as success, even as their values destroy the earth, and then go into neoliberal universities and train the next generation of hopeful music teachers to be as neoliberal, as technologically savvy, as critical of poor social majorities, and as polluting. I am conservative. To conserve is to serve, its Latin root servare, and like conversation and conversion, this occurs with other human and non-human life. In conversation, I convert to sense what to conserve. I want to conserve musical traditions that cannot be and should not be ossified and petrified in universities. I want to conserve places in music that industry doesn't. I want to leave a viable, diverse, healthy planet for my child. This may be conservative, but seems contrary to a conservative movement hijacked by neoliberal ideology. Universities and other industry have a deleterious history of conserving culture, including languages and musics. Only dirty work, living on soil, within the reach of agents who know each other, can conserve places, traditions, and history. There we go. So it looks like that's about halfway point for the postlude. We'll stop there. We're on page 113. Here I had my definition of what value is, right? Neoliberalism uses money to assign value. Everybody in a neoliberal society knows how valuable he or she is, having an objective, non-discriminatory measure of self-value. That's harsh, but it's true, and this is the system we live in, right? There's a reason why everybody who becomes president is either rich or in the pockets of a rich person. Working my way back onto page 111, I talk about love, right? Community of amateurs. That's what teachers ought to be. People who love their subject, but love the kids and their families and the communities and the earth. All of these things must be loved. That's what good teaching is. Let somebody else worry about the curriculum and do it and resist it however you see fit based on the ideal of love, right? God's love, which we know it within us, right? Whether this practice would be bad for our kids, right? So if we start right there, right? Amateurs, lovers of what we're doing, And then I also have the definition of Promethean self, who would burn the whole world to steal from the gods, right? There we go. That's a big challenge to my tech-focused music educator friends. Have a great day. One more reading, and I'll be done.